Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. Overcoming negative reactions while being a minority female in STEM. My name is Dr. Antoinette Davis. I am a mathematics faculty member at EKU, and I have been for about 3 years now. And during this time, I've had to overcome a whole lot of reactions, both positive and negative. And being a minority female in STEM is often lonely. It's often a place where sometimes you wonder, how did you get in this field and why did you stay in this field? And there's a lot in this presentation to really cover all of that. But I want to start with a film that just came out not long ago, Hidden Figures, very influential movie where it talked about the reactions that the African American young ladies overcame by being employees as well as human computers at NASA.
State of mind like the one your daughter has. You have to see that she becomes.
Catherine, we all gonna end up unemployed riding around in this pile of junk.
You're welcome to walk for 16 miles. Oh, sit in the back of the bus.
You have the identification number?
We're just on our way to work at NASA.
I had no idea they hired.
There are quite a few women working in the space program.
You know what we're doing here? We're putting a human on top of a vessel shooting into space that's never been done before. Don't even have to petition. They can look beyond the numbers. Math doesn't exist.
We have someone? Catherine's a gal for that. She can handle any numbers you put in front of her.
You're a computer at NASA. You never have to handle that sort of.
Yes, and I run into some things at NASA, Mr. Johnson. And it's not because we wear skirts. It's because we wear glasses.
You've been gone for 300 hours.
Was Mama gone for 12 and a half days?
No, but it felt like it.
14 days, astronauts will be here for training. Everything we do can matter to their wives, to their children. It's going to matter to the whole country.
My girls are ready.
There's no protocol for women attending.
There's no protocol for men serving the earth either, son.
We all get there together, we don't get there at all. Yes, if you had like me, would you wish to be an engineer?
I wouldn't have to. I'd already be.
Don't you know that wherever?
Think about the fact that as being a supervisor at NASA, Katherine Johnson's supervisor had to even make the statement, if we can't all go together, we don't go at all. Think about it. In a stage where it should have been equality, don't get me wrong, there's a time of segregation, but these young ladies are computing not basic math. We're talking about advanced math that at that time didn't even have a name. So Katherine Johnson was brought in to figure out the trajectory for John Glenn's flights. This is one person. This is not a computer, which is what we use now. This is not a conglomerate of people. It's just one person. And they relied on her calculations not only to get John Glenn into space, but also to get him back, because they had some issues getting him back. And at that time, Katherine Johnson had been released from her position. They ended up having to rehire her, bring her back in to make sure that the trajectory was correct so that he could get back to Earth safely. Still talking about overcoming negative reactions. First of all, what do you do when you encounter negative reactions at work? What is something that you do to overcome? What do you do?
What do I do? It really depends on the politics, and they get complicated because you get real unpopular real fast as soon as you stand up for yourself.
That's very true. And a lot of people feel it's better to stand down. But I believe differently. If you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything. But what do you know about other people? Do they tend to stand up, or do they tend to say, you know what, this is something that's not my party, it's not my problem?
They tend to not stand up. They tend to keep their head down.
And it's unfortunate. Because the way to make change, you have to speak up. Nobody knows there's a problem unless you address it. Have you ever experienced adversity on your job? And if you have, how did you handle it? Adversity. First of all, what's your definition of an adversity?
Adversity can be anything that makes you feel maybe unwelcome or incapable.
Okay. So how have you been made to, say, feel unwelcome, or have you been made to feel unwelcome?
Most definitely. As soon as you, when I reported some leaders of some tutors for treating some of my students with what I felt were racist attitudes, I became very unpopular, and the atmosphere became, why did you speak up? Why don't you just mind your own business? That's not your business what the tutors over here do. Stay in your own lane.
How did you handle that? How did it make you feel?
I filed a report with the EOC because I couldn't get anybody to listen to me on the level that they were supposed to. So then you follow the handbook and you go on up. What's the next step?
Sure.
If you're not getting protection for your students at one level, you just file it on up. So it took 2 years for some people to start speaking to me again. You just wait it out.
That's true, because it'll come back around eventually. But just think of how things would have been if you had not stood up.
Right. Things got a little bit better.
Just a little bit, but it's progress nonetheless.
Yes.
Women in STEM. When I looked at putting together this presentation, I was astonished at how few women are in STEM. At the same token, how few minority women are in STEM. 74% of STEM members are male. So guess what? There's only 26% that are female. And that margin for minority females is even smaller. It says STEM workers right in the middle, where it says other minorities, that only makes up 9%. 9%. That's not a lot at all. 9%. So when you think about it, the sad part about it is, with us only making up a small percentage, when you look over here, it says out of the 100 female bachelor students, 12 graduate in STEM, but only 3 continue in STEM after 10 years.
Really?
After 10 years,
Really?
3. That's minute, and we're talking about out of 100. Out of 100. And it's unfortunate, and it makes me wonder, what is, one, bringing the women into STEM, but at the same token, what's pulling them out of STEM? And I believe a big part of it is lack of support, lack of resources. I would even go as far as saying lack of cultural competency. Because when you bring in minority women into any environment, what kind of community do you have for them? What is in place so that they can come in, not just to work, but to be involved, to belong, to feel like they can be there for a while? The biggest reason, I believe, in terms of those 3 women who are left, they always say the strong survive, but a lot of people endure.
Yes.
A lot of people endure through the process. Being the only black faculty member in my department, which is math and stats, it's difficult. Because who is my community? And at the same token, when things occur, who do I talk to? So I come to conferences like this, or I go and talk with other colleagues, so that I can get clarification on things that are going on. And oftentimes, those women who leave STEM, a lot of them leave academia as well.
Yes.
They don't just go from one academic position to another, they leave academia altogether. When they're looking for that belonging aspect, they feel this is something that I need, I'm not getting it, how do I progress forward? As it relates to this other graph, this is a graph that I found online regarding women in STEM at Clemson University. Clemson. Still talking about women in STEM. We're talking about why they're staying, why they're leaving. In between 2010 and 2014, 56% of women left. So that means there's only 44% left there between 2010 and 2014. Now, my question is, after 2014, did the majority of the 44% that was left, Did they stick around, or did they find other positions? Sadly, only 2 women in STEM are permanent chairs or directors. 2. Only 2. And then when you look here on this graph, it says out of 509 STEM faculty, you see that little bitty bar? Only one of those bars says African American. And below that, 2 says Hispanic women. So we're saying out of 509, only 3 are minority. So not only are we going into these STEM fields, we're not really being represented academically. So when other young ladies come in who are minorities, who are their role models? We're not there according to this graph. We're just not there. And then it gets even smaller when you get up to middle level management. Dean, associate dean, 1 out of 10. So that's saying we want this one diversity vote to represent all diversity votes, and that's not fair. It's just not fair. And one person's opinion may not be representative of all minority groups. Ways to overcome negative reactions as a minority in your field. Number 1, control your response. It is often seen and assumed that minorities have strong responses. And strong meaning there's some type of verbal exchange, very well could be a physical exchange. Not that it happens in every situation, but it is often assumed. So control your response. Number 2, learn from negative situations. In my position, my current position, I was referred to as incompetent, and I have never forgotten that. However, I did not let that go into my psyche to say this is who you are, because I know that that's not who I am. So learning from that negative situation says the person who told it to me, that's a reflection of who they are, not me. Number 3, if you make a mistake, admit it. The hardest thing as adults is saying, hey, I did something wrong. And you know what? I know what I did wrong. Too often, you have more people who are willing to lie and place blame on others than they are to take the blame for themselves. Number 4, maintain a positive view. Because in all situations, as my mother would say, you're either staying or you're leaving. She's very, very, very cut and dry. You're either staying or you're leaving. So when you maintain a positive view, that gives you the opportunity to stay in your current position and be able to go through the waters. As you mentioned, if you have to go up the process, do so to get your due diligence and your due respect. But at all times, maintaining a positive view does not mean overlooking the negative reactions that you see. Oftentimes in the workplace, you may think, hey, I can withstand it all, I'm just going to stay here the next 20, 30 years. But in general, being positive doesn't mean being run over. You very well may need to find a new position, and that's okay. Number 5, keep accentuating the positive, because the more you think positive, the more your mind will come up with different ways to channel how you feel about particular negative situations in your field. And as a minority, yes, you will be far and few, and that's okay, because wherever you are, I just believe you can make a difference anywhere. And if you're not appreciated, this might be a good time to find another place where you will be appreciated, because your skills and talents can be taken advantage of if you're not careful. Some final quotes. Final quotes. As you think about STEM, you realize that STEM is not going to include a lot of women, let alone minority women. As you can see in the previous graph, there are more men in STEM than there are women. Okay? This is a picture of Maria Mitchell, and her quote says, "No woman should say, I am but a woman, but a woman. What more can you ask me to be? Born a woman, born with an average brain of humanity, born with more than an average heart. If you are mortal, what higher destiny can you have? No matter where you are, nor what you are a power." So even in her time, as an early STEM person, she realized that there's power in being just who she is. Nowhere in there did it say that she had to change who she was to accommodate others. It said she was comfortable being just who she was. And she was an early astronomer. Katherine Johnson is the young lady who was displayed in Hidden Figures. She figured out many trajectories for many astronauts. And her quote is, "I felt most proud of the success of the Apollo mission. They were going to the moon, and I computed the path to get there." And not knowing at that time, but she paved the way for a lot of young women, minority women, who would not have had the opportunity to go into mathematics. A lot of people believe that because she was at NASA, that she was just an engineer. She was actually a NASA mathematician. And this was before the times where you had to have a master's and a PhD just to be called a mathematician. And along with Katherine Johnson, there is Ms. Dorothy Vaughan. Her and Katherine Johnson were great friends, and they were both employed by NASA as human computers. Her quote says, "I changed what I could, and what I couldn't, I endured." So as I wrap up this presentation, as I look back on what it means to be a minority in STEM, I'm encouraged. At the same token, I'm thankful. Because this isn't a field that I just knew that I would go into. Over time, math began to become natural to me, and I'm glad that I did continue forward in the field. As far as overcoming negative reactions, what I've done so far, you wouldn't believe this, I've turned them into presentations like this. Because I believe that, hey, if it's occurred to me in my life, I should be able to get a good presentation out of it. So, last point, when it comes to overcoming negative reactions, just be positive. Even though you're a minority female in STEM, do not be reactionary. Find ways to channel your frustration into a positive way, and make sure that no matter what, you're paving the way for other women behind you. Because it's not just women, it's minority women, it's all women as a whole. We all have a job to do, and I'm hoping that more women can not only go into NASA, but STEM fields as a whole.